The broadcast is live. Very shortly the channel will be too. And there it goes. So hello everyone and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I am Christiana Ellis.
I am Mike Bettine. Hey, no, I'm good. Sorry.
Okay. And you are good. You are good. But tonight, Mike and I are watching, or at least talking about, we're watching the Oscar nominations. How about that? So,
Yes.
in our last episode, we had planned for two movies that we were going to watch, and we'll probably still talk about those eventually, unless we decide to just punt and do a different episode anyway. But because the Oscar nominations came out, it's time for our annual Oscar movie marathon, where we try to see as many of the nominated movies as possible. But we have a little bit of, discussion to do about that, right? Like we kind of cover this every year, but it's just a sort of a reminder, first of all, that naturally we understand, like probably most smart people, that the Oscars are certainly not the end all be all of what defines a good movie. But it is one way to create a filter of sorts in terms of helping us to discern what movies to maybe take a look at. But also, it often presents an opportunity to watch movies because they're nominated that we might otherwise have never watched at all. And sometimes we really get surprised by something we loved and never would have checked out.
Yes, and there's an added layer for me that I think has always been there, but even more prevalent this year is movies that I've intended to watch, but never really found the time. And then because of this, it's a movie I wanted to watch, and this helps drive me to make sure that I watch it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I gave up many years ago, and we always said from the beginning it was never a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I have for 15 years running always been lower than yours, and we took last year off, so maybe I saw more Oscar nominated movies than you last year. We don't know.
Yeah.
But the other 15 years, I always end up. But that's not the point of it, because it
Right.
does, for me, it gives me what I want, which is, I come out of, heavy wintertime sports seasons, doing a lot of things, don't watch a lot of movies,
Mm-hmm.
and this invigorates me to go watch some movies again.
Exactly.
And so I watch more than I would have, even if it's not as many as you, who just has like just more of a habit of having movies in your, because you don't watch as many sports, so you've got plenty of hours freed up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting in
Certainly,
front of the
that
TV just like
helps.
you are. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I do lots of other things in addition, to replace that time of sports. But sports
Right.
takes up a lot
I'm
of,
saying though, like, yeah, in the
yeah.
in the TV watching time, it's not like I'm not implying that like you're watching more entertainment than I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's if I'm watching a 2 hour basketball game, you could be watching one of these
Well,
movies, and then we still both go off and do other things. Yeah,
so
I
to
wasn't implying
connect
that you
it,
don't do other
oh,
things.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, sure. So, but to connect it to sports again, as far as seeing, like who sees more, like we're tracking it, but we're tracking it kind of like you keep scoring in golf. Like you can have two people playing golf against one another or competing. Certainly people do that. But it's also quite possible to have a friendly game where you are both just trying to improve your own score. And that's really
Yes,
kind of what we're doing here.
and
And
enjoying the process during the time. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So, um, our habit when we do these is that we start with pretty much a just a rundown of what the actual Oscar nominations are, and we might briefly talk about which ones we've seen, which ones we haven't. And when we cover movies that one of us has seen but the other hasn't, we might do just a brief 1 to 2 sentences what it's about, maybe general impressions, but only very quick, especially when we're doing this part. And
Yeah.
then once we have, and even if we have both seen it, we're going to save our in-depth conversation about it for after we've gone through all of the nominations.
Correct.
But then we will plan to, in whatever time we have left tonight and in future episodes, we will talk more in detail about the movies we have both seen. But the other piece is that we don't do the short film categories, either animated, documentary, or feature, just because those tend to be a lot harder to see. Some of them, sometimes you can, but that's just sort of how we've done it over the years, and I haven't really felt any impulse to change it.
No, and I thought I saw one of the streaming services has been really good about trying to get all of them on there, but
Hmm.
it's just it's not worth it for what the exercise is. It's fine to not have them.
We never get anywhere close to seeing all of the nominated films anyway, so we're focused on the feature length ones, is the point. I'm
Yep.
petting my dog. So, so without further ado, then, would you like to read the Best Picture nominees this year?
Oh, I was going to turn that to you,
Oh,
but
well,
I am happy to do it.
well, please do.
Uh, we have how many do we have this year?
10.
Looks like 10. Yep. So it's full year. Belfast, Coda, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story.
And so, of those, so far, I have seen Coda, which I actually just watched this morning, Dune, Nightmare Alley, and The Power of the Dog.
And we have both seen Dune,
Hmm.
and I have also seen Don't Look Up, but that is it for me right now. But that leaves some movies that will get me some high
Sure.
scores as I start to watch them.
Yes, yes. Certainly, the movies that have the most nominations bump up the total percentage. You get a lot of categories that way. So, just in terms of our brief discussion, CODA is actually, it is all capitals because it's an acronym. It stands for Child or Children of Deaf Adults. And it's about a girl who is the only hearing member of her family. Both her parents and her older brother are deaf. And they work as fisher people in Massachusetts. But she has a love of singing and a talent for it. And her desire to pursue that puts her at conflicting priorities with continuing to help her family. And I found it really lovely, and honestly, it actually jumped just this morning when I watched it up to my current front runner for Best Picture.
Interesting. Uh, Don't Look Up, I believe many people are familiar with. There was a Netflix release with Leonardo DiCaprio and numerous other A-list stars. It's the story of an asteroid barreling towards Earth, but it's a satirical um, take really on. It's I think it's pretty much well known that it's intended to be on climate change and people, the politicization and the attitudes towards when this impending disaster is coming at you. How do you respond? Um, it's interesting. I recognize what they're doing in it. I think it's well made, but it's not. It didn't resonate with me as like powerfully as I think that the intention was. I mean,
Hmm.
it's fine. It's
I,
kind of my short summary.
I think I haven't watched it yet, partly because I'm kind of anticipating a similar reaction, but we'll see, because we've got it on the list.
Yep.
Um, And then for Dune, we've both seen it. We will discuss it more in detail as we continue this overall process. But it, of course, is the latest attempt to adapt cinematically the classic sci-fi novel Dune, which takes place in the distant future on a desert planet that is the only place where you can harvest this special spice, which is kind of a drug that lets people see the future and do various other things. And we have a main character who is struggling with a destiny to be some kind of prophesied hero slash something. Um,
Leader, sort of, not,
yeah,
but not really. Yeah.
but we'll talk more about that, of course. But it's big, huge, pretty sci-fi that we'll talk more about it. I found it capable but uninspiring.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I've heard from a lot of people who are passionate about Dune the book and how poor the movies have done, that this was the best adaptation that they had seen of it,
Mm.
which both things can be true. Like it can be the best version of the book and still not be like awe inspiring. I felt like I understood what the hell was going on.
Mm.
I haven't read the book. I felt like I got the point of Dune more from this movie than I ever did from the other ones that I've seen. Um, but it ultimately, yeah, did not sweep
Yeah.
me away.
We'll talk more about it, but
Yeah,
I think one of its big successes is that it is by far the most accessible telling of the story so far.
I would agree. So,
Yeah. All right. Moving on, the remaining films that one of us has seen in the Best Picture is Nightmare Alley, which is a Guillermo del Toro film starring Bradley Cooper and Kate Blanchett and a variety of other people that I'm forgetting their names at the moment. But it is actually a remake of a 1940s film noir, and it's a very film noir story about a man running from something because, of course, who gets involved with a carnival and eventually starts learning about the art of mentalism. Um, it is beautifully shot, as Guillermo del Toro movies frequently are. It's an extremely slow burn. You have to be pretty patient with noir type slow burn stories because it's it's an extra slow burn. I feel like it does get there in the end, but like I said, I feel like it could have been a third shorter. But I liked it overall. And then The Power of the Dog is a movie that it's a Western. It takes place in 1920s Montana. There's a pair of brothers that run a ranch together, played by Benedict Cumberbatch and Jesse Plemons. And the Benedict Cumberbatch character is a real piece of work in the sense that he is the sort of person who is a bully not because he punches you, but because he watches you very carefully and then with intelligence and insight slips a scalpel into your most vulnerable part when you least expect it. Um, and then most the movie is people figuring out how to deal with him because he's just this huge presence in the area. But in particular, when Jesse Plemons gets married to a local woman played by Kirsten Dunst, and her about to enter college age son, played by Cody Smith McPhee. This movie is a hard recommend to average moviegoers because the level of tension it maintains throughout most of the movie, where you are sure that something terrible is going to happen, but you don't know what, and you don't know when, and you don't know where, and the movie just sustains that tension in a way that's pretty remarkable. And I can't honestly think of another movie that made me feel quite like this one did in that regard. I spent most of the movie not sure how I felt about it, and then the ending blew me away. So I think it's very good, but it's very good in a specific way that I suspect a lot of people will not enjoy watching. So we will probably talk more about that one.
yes.
All right, so moving on to further categories, we have next the best animated feature, and this is one where we've each seen more, there's more of them that we've both seen. So the nominees this year are Encanto, Flea, Luca, The Mitchells versus the Machines, and Raya and the Last Dragon. And I have seen all of those except for Flea.
I have seen all of them except Flea and the Mitchells versus the Machines.
Mm-hmm. So Flea, just because probably that's the one that the fewest amount of people would have heard about, is also the nominee for Best Foreign Film from Denmark this year, which is why a lot of people are probably like, what is that? I've never heard of that. It's because it's not an American picture. Encanto and Luca, of course, are both Pixar. Raya and the Last Dragon is Disney. The Mitchells versus the Machines. I I don't remember the studio, but I believe it is viewable on Netflix. Um, again, we'll talk more about them. Encanto is it's about a South American family where everyone in the family is born with a special sort of magical power that they use to help the nearby town until Mirabel, the main character, who mysteriously does not have a power and is not sure what to do about it. And it's a musical with songs written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. I like it a lot, even if I have quibbles with the ending.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So.
And even my endings are more nitpicks than real complaints, but we will discuss that one more, I'm sure. Luca is about a couple of boys who are like mer creatures. They're not mermaids or mermen like with fish tails or like in The Little Mermaid, but they are like underwater creatures with arms, legs, and sort of fish tails. But they have the ability magically that when they dry off, when they are completely dry, they appear like humans, and then return to their normal appearance when they are wet again. And they are drawn to and intrigued by the lives of the humans in the nearby city, but their families believe that it is too dangerous for them to. In particular, Luca, the title character's family, believes it's too dangerous to investigate until he and his friend run away and get embroiled in adventures there. And I found it charming and entertaining, and I liked it. But I overall, like, until I saw it come up in the nominations again, I had honestly forgotten all about it. I mean, that's not really a complaint, but as much as it didn't stick with me the way some movies have.
Yeah, I agree. It's incredibly entertaining. But when you watch it, you don't say, yes, that's going to be on the list. But I'm not mad that it's on the list. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a perfectly competent film that's...
Yeah, it's entertaining.
It's entertaining, has a great message. Not a deep message, just more of a, like, how do you balance what your family wants with what you want? How do you balance what's risky versus what's safe? I mean, those are interesting things to explore.
There's some discussion about whether how much the ideas of queer themes are intentional in there versus easy to read in. But we can talk more about that, especially just in the context of, I've been hearing some discussion recently in a broader sense about the idea of, while it being great that there's a lot more diversity and representation being put into major studio releases these days, and that's great, that sometimes it's easy to forget that you're still nonetheless getting a sanitized by committee version of that representation that is because they've seen that makes money now. And that's not to say they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't have representation, but it's just kind of a question of, I think it can still be worth analyzing that aspect about it. Which I'm not even really blaming on, like, I'm not saying that's the problem with Luca, but as much as that might be something we discuss when we talk more about it. The Mitchells versus the Machines is another one where I'm gonna. The basic premise is we have a teenage daughter who has never quite gotten along with her family, and in particular her dad, because she's just very artistic in nature. She wants to be a filmmaker, and her family wants to be supportive but don't really get it. But in particular, she has always really struggled with her dad's acceptance of that, and they're all dealing with that complicated family dynamic when robots just try to take over the world. And it is another one that I found enormously entertaining and think is a very good movie. I have quibbles with the ending again, so we'll talk more about that probably.
So is your pick Raya and the Last Dragon?
Uh, no, not necessarily. Um,
You
um,
just haven't been you've been complimentary but not enthusiastic about the
well,
other four. So
I'm not
they're-
trying to say I'm not trying to describe them now in context of what's my favorite necessarily, as much as I'm just giving the capsule idea of my position. I think honestly, Encanto is still probably the lead for me.
yeah,
But
okay.
Ryan the Last Dragon is sort of it draws a lot of influence from various East Asian and Southeast Asian cultures, but it's telling basically kind of a young adult adventure story where you have to get all the video game tokens to save the world, which is, I don't mean to say like dismissively or anything, but I think everybody knows what kind of story that is, right?
Yeah.
Um, there was a YouTuber that got in a lot of trouble for trying to point out, and not even necessarily in a very complaining way, that it was somewhat resembling the Avatar: The Last Airbender story, um, which that kind of turned into a whole thing that I'm not trying to wade into exactly right now, but I feel like that people understand what kind of story we're talking about when we make that comparison.
Yes. I We have very similar takes on all of these. It was uh, beautifully designed, which kind of made it more interesting than, I mean, it wasn't, not that it wasn't interesting, but it took, like you said, a staple plot and it gave it a new up, like facelift to it that was pretty cool. So,
Okay, so uh, moving on to the next category. Oh, hang on.
okay,
It
we are
helps if
going
I
to
got
best
the right screen on. There we go. Best director.
on best director. So we've got Paul Thomas Anderson for Licorice Pizza, neither of us have seen. Kenneth Branagh for Belfast, neither of us have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog, which you saw and
Mm-hmm.
described earlier. Uh, Ryusuke Amaguchi for Drive My Car, neither of us have seen. And Steven Spielberg for West Side Story, neither of us have seen. So
Yeah.
that's
I love all Paul Thomas Anderson movies, although not always to the same degree. I'm excited to see Licorice Pizza, but I haven't yet, of course. Jane
yes,
Campion, this is her second Oscar nomination because she previously was nominated for The Piano, but that, years ago.
many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Spielberg is well regarded, and I've heard
Mm-hmm.
good things about West Side Story and not so good things about West Side
Yeah.
Story. So,
Kenneth
but not
Branagh
much
is
more in this
sometimes
category.
I
Yeah.
was going to say Kenneth Branagh is sometimes a mixed bag as a director. Like he's made some great movies and some that were maybe not as good. Um, and then
I'm
Drive
in
My
the
Car is the nomination for Best Foreign Film from Japan this year, as well as being one of the Best Picture nominees overall.
yeah. So short answer is I'm looking forward to seeing these movies, but I
Mm-hmm.
have not made time to see them yet.
Yeah.
So
All right. So next, Best Actor. We have Javier Bardem for Being the Ricardos, Benedict Cumberbatch for The Power of the Dog, Andrew Garfield for Tick Tick Boom, Will Smith for King Richard, and Denzel Washington for The Tragedy of Macbeth. And of those, I have seen The Power of the Dog, which we talked about already, and I've seen Tick Tick Boom, and I absolutely loved it. It floored me. I thought it was incredible. Um, I'm a little surprised, honestly. Or maybe it's not that I'm surprised it didn't get a Best Picture nom, just partly because my enjoyment of it felt very personal to me, and I get that not everyone would necessarily relate to it in the same way. But I loved it, and Andrew Garfield is great in it. That said, the only other one that I've seen is Benedict Cumberbatch in The Power of the Dog, and he's real good in that. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch has been around for a while now. People know his tricks. so to speak, which is, again, not intended to be dismissive, but just people have seen him do a lot of stuff. He's really good in this movie.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
I would
I'm
find that
glad
a
to hear you.
tough. Hmm? Go ahead.
No, I was just to say I'm glad to hear you say that because just from the trailer perspective, Tick Tick Boom is the one that actually interests me the most.
Hmm.
Not that these other ones don't, but that's the one that like makes me want to watch it.
Yeah. So Tick
Um,
Tick Boom, just for anyone unfamiliar. So the guy who wrote Rent, the musical, has a little bit of a tragic story there in the sense that he actually died before it premiered. So the guy who created Rent, which became this big sensation of a Broadway musical, didn't ever get to see it reach those heights of success. And Tick Tick Boom is a stage show, like not fully produced like a Broadway musical, but kind of a one man show where he sometimes brings his friends up, sort of thing. Um, that is about his failure to adapt his previous musical. And then the movie Tick Tick Boom is basically it takes a lot of the story being told in that sort of one man stage show and dramatizes it like movie scenes instead of a guy on a stage telling a story. But then it cuts back and forth between the stage show version, although with Andrew Garfield playing the character instead of Jonathan Larson, the actual guy. But you do in the credits see clips of the original show. But it's got a lot of musicals in it. It's basically like it's about a creative person. The title comes from the idea that he is approaching his 30th birthday, and all of his Broadway idols had achieved their big breakouts before 30, and he's feeling anxious about it. Which is a little bit interesting as someone on the other side of 40, looking back at someone being so stressed out about 30. But nonetheless, it's a really, like, if you're into musicals and stories about creative people having stress about it, it's great. I am, and I thought it was great. But okay, let's keep moving. For best, you want to do best actress?
can I just do the last one? But
Hmm? Oh, what? Hmm? Well, okay, I just read
oh
best
no,
actor.
sorry, I did the best director.
That's
I
okay.
apologize. I
No
was
worries.
looking at, I hadn't scrolled it down yet. So neither of us have seen any of these,
No.
so we don't really have much to talk about yet.
Hmm.
Jessica Chastain, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Olivia Colman, The Lost Daughter, Penelope Cruz, Parallel Mothers, Nicole Kidman, Being the Ricardos, and Kristen Stewart in Spencer. So
Uh,
all names we know, but
yeah.
not. This is always a tough category.
I certainly all of those are familiar names in this type of category. Except I think Kristen Stewart. Like, is this her first like serious acting nomination? I didn't look it up or anything. I just remember she kind of rose to fame as being Bella in the Twilight movies, which wasn't exactly held up as a pinnacle of great acting choices, right? Which is not necessarily to blame any of that on her, but it's just interesting to see her now getting the highest nominations for prestige roles. Because I mean, she's certainly been great in a lot of things, but it's just interesting that she became most famous as in kind of a um, well, I don't know. People like Twilight. I won't bash it.
Yeah, and I always remember her as the child in Panic Room,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
as where she got her start, and she was great in that. I mean, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
Oscar nomination worthy, but um,
I liked
I'm
her
just
most
trying to.
recently in I think it was just called Last Christmas, which was basically just one of those sort of Christmas rom coms, but notable for featuring a lesbian couple rather than a man and a woman. But she was really good in that.
Yeah. So anyway, in this one, she plays Diana, Princess
Mm-hmm.
of Wales.
Yes,
So it'll be interesting to see.
I've heard a
Um,
lot of good things. I've heard some people complaining they thought Spencer should have had more nominations, but perhaps we will see.
we will see.
Okay. So for Best Supporting Actor, we have Ciarán Hinds. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. In Belfast, Troy Kotsur in Coda, Jesse Plemons in The Power of the Dog, J.K. Simmons in Being the Ricardos, and Cody Smith-McPhee in The Power of the Dog. Um, Jesse Plemons and Cody Smith-McPhee as, Benedict Cumberbatch's brother and the son of Kirsten Dunst's character, respectively, are both really good. It's a movie full of great performances, which is probably like because of the movie's refusal through almost the whole runtime to actually cash in on any of the incredible tension it's building, that hangs a lot of weight on the actors. But their performances are able to withstand it, and it's great. Um, Troy Kotsur is a deaf actor playing the father in this family depicted in the movie, and so my understanding is that this is the first Oscar acting nomination for a deaf actor.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And J.K. Simmons' appearance on here just reiterates something that we've both heard, and if you haven't heard, that the strength of Being the Ricardos is the casting. That in and of itself, it's a fine movie, but it is. I mean, it had Best Actor, Best Actress. It didn't have Best Supporting Actress, but it had Best Supporting Actor. Mm-hmm. So he's also very good, but it's.
I like J.K. Simmons. So we'll have to see. I had a weird reservation from that movie that I'm not really sure where it was coming from. Perhaps I will have to watch it to exercise that mystery feeling.
All right, so we enter into Best Supporting Actress, mm-hmm. Another category where you have only seen Power of the Dog, and I've mm-hmm. seen nothing. So Jessie Buckley, The Lost Daughter, Ariana DeBose, West Side Story, Judi Dench, Belfast, Kristen Dunst, The Power of the Dog, who you just spoke about, mm-hmm. Anjanue Ellis, I apologize if I got that wrong, mm-hmm. King Richard.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So King Richard, my understanding is it's the movie about Venus and Serena Williams and their father, who I believe is played by Will Smith.
Yeah, Will Smith is Richard Williams, their mm-hmm. father.
Yeah.
Pushed them into greatness, but mm-hmm. maybe not always in the nicest of ways.
I really don't know the story of Belfast at all, except my guess is that it takes place in Ireland.
I thought I knew it at one point, but I don't.
Lost Daughter, my understanding is that's kind of a human drama with Olivia Colman's character kind of on a vacation who kind of can't help but get swept up in the drama of a young couple that's also there at the same sort of resort. I may be mistaken, but that was my impression.
Belfast, the short hit is young boy and his working class Belfast family experience the tumultuous late 60s. So
is that the Troubles? Is that what they call the Troubles, or am I way off?
I don't know if that's what they call it. It's kind of the start of all of.
Yeah, certainly there was a lot of conflict.
I thought the Troubles were in the 80s, but I might be wrong.
You know what? I bet if we watch that movie, when we're ready to talk about it, we'll find the answer out to those questions.
We will learn more.
Yes. All right. So moving on. We didn't touch on West Side Story, but I think that's because everyone knows what that is, right? It's a remake of the classic movie musical directed by Steven Spielberg. Okay, so we've got Best Original Screenplay. Kenneth Branagh for Belfast, Adam McKay and David Sirota for Don't Look Up, Zach Balin for King Richard, Paul Thomas Anderson for Licorice Pizza, and Eskil Vogt and Joachim Trier for The Worst Person in the World. None of us... Wait, you have seen Don't Look Up, but you didn't fill out the box for it. on that category. I've heard a lot of good things about The Worst Person in the World. I don't know what it's about. I've just heard lots of people say they really like it.
Just got a
But
whole percentage.
well done. See? Making progress already.
That's all right. You got one coming up here. So,
Oh, yeah?
yeah, you didn't do best song, I think.
Oh, okay. Well,
Anyway,
we'll see.
we'll get to that.
We'll get
Yeah.
there. Okay, so you want to read Best Adapted Screenplay?
Yep. Feel bad on this one. I think. I
There,
mean,
yeah,
because I think this is a
there's some difficult, exotic
yeah. So
spellings,
I'm just going to
exotic to our
caveat reading
sensibility.
them. I'm going to do the best I can.
Yeah,
I think this is an Irish name. I think it's Sean.
I think you're right.
Sean Hayter for Coda.
Hmm.
Ryusuke Amaguchi and Takamasa Oe for Drive My Car. I mean, these are all tough until you get to the left.
Yeah.
John Spites and Denise Villanueva and Eric Roth for Dune. Maggie Gyllenhaal for The Last Daughter. And Jane Campion, also the director of The Power of the Dog.
Yep. Good for Maggie Gyllenhaal, who certainly has been notable in acting categories previously. I think this is her first movie. I can't remember for sure, but
I don't know of another one.
yeah.
So
but as mentioned before, because all of these are also Best Picture nominees, I've seen Coda, Dune, and Power of the Dog, and Mike has seen Dune.
Ooh.
Yes. All right. So, Best Foreign Film. From Japan, we have Drive My Car. From Denmark, we have Flee, which we mentioned as one of the best animated feature movies as well. Italy, we have The Hand of God. From Bhutan, we have Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, which makes me want to see it, honestly. I just hearing is like, I want to see a yak in the classroom. I want to know what that's about. Norway, The Worst Person in the World, which, again, I've heard great things about from people whose opinion I trust, but all I know is that they liked it, not anything else about it. All the stills of it just show an actress who's like on a street. Okay. How about this? Do you want to do Best Original Score and Best Original Song?
sure. The only thing I was going to say is I'm very looking forward to The Hand of God.
Hmm.
It's a story. I mean, The Hand of God is an expression from. It's a goal that Diego Maradona, a famous soccer player in the '80s, scored, where he most likely, and by most footage, looks like he kind of like punched the ball in instead of hit it with his head.
Mm.
When they asked him if like he used his hand, he said no, it was the hand of God or something like that. But this is a story about a boy growing up in Naples when Maradona came to play for the Naples team, and it's kind of his coming of age story told alongside like him watching the soccer player and some of the, again, tumultuous, just like we talked about tumultuous Belfast in the 60s, this is tumultuous Naples in the 80s. But I think it's an interesting way to tell a story about a time that we're not that familiar with. So I'm interested in it. Best original score, we have Nicholas Britell for Don't Look Up.
Here we go.
We have Hans Zimmer for Dune. Jermaine Franco for Encanto. Alberto Iglesias for Parallel Mothers. Johnny Greenwood for The Power of the Dog. So
The only new one.
What?
I was just going to say the only new one that we haven't kind of touched on already is Parallel Mothers, which I don't really know anything about.
I don't know much about that. I think I really like to see Johnny Greenwood on here. He's the Radiohead guitarist, and he made his score debut with There Will Be Blood. And it was kind of seen as like, oh, this is interesting that he stepped out of his normal thing. And for him to now have a second nomination, I think that's awesome.
Yeah. The score for Power of the Dog is really good. It's certainly one of those scores that's designed to kind of fade into the background rather than call attention to itself.
Yep.
because both kinds can be good. It's not a quality question, right? It's just a style question, but it's certainly the kind that tends to blend in, but it may help maintain, again, that incredible tension that that movie has. Um,
That which is awesome. Which I mean, that's kind of I mean, that's how Radiohead played. So
mhm,
it's I mean, it's and that's how There Will Be Blood was kind of. So he's matching his talents to movies that make sense for him. So it's cool.
mhm.
Um,
Um, with the Encanto, it's a little unusual just because certainly in a musical you tend to pay the most attention to the songs as opposed to the music that plays around the songs. So I kind of off the top of my head feel like I can't think of what that music is. But that said, you know, for a musical where music is so critical, to have the music that's not during the songs not feel jarring or out of place, that's an accomplishment all by itself, right?
right. And then Dune is I mean, it's Hans Zimmer.
Hmm.
It's what they wanted for this, which is sweeping, you know, scores about ships flying over sand. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I'll
that's what they
probably
wanted. That's what they got.
yeah
Yeah.
I'll probably re-listen to some, but honestly, I don't remember the music at all from that movie.
I don't remember the music specifically. I remember the music being critical to the mood of what they were trying to do. Like
Mm.
those scenes that like some of that stuff when they're flying around over the dunes would have
Mm.
been boring if it wasn't like so I don't even know the songs, but
I
it's
mean, I've certainly liked a lot of Hans Zimmer scores. There's no judgment there.
yeah.
What's the score like in Don't Look Up?
It's almost like part of the edit, right? Like it like tells the mood. It's almost like trying to teach you how you should feel at a certain time,
Hmm.
and then it's very hesitate to say this, like having not seen it in a while, but my memory of it makes it feel almost very, very like television-y,
Hmm.
where you hit a point and it like leads you up and then you break from that part of the action, almost like the cliffhanger,
Hmm.
and then you go to something else. And so like the score, because there's a lot of different stories being interwoven in that movie, and the score like reminds you like which group you're with, but then as each group like reaches a climax before it cuts over to another story, it crescendos.
Hmm.
And again, don't hold me to that, but that's the feeling I remember getting from
Oh
it.
no, I'm gonna hold you to it. We're gonna
Yeah,
play this
watch
back
it and
at
tell
the
me I was
congressional
absolutely insane.
hearings.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that movie like 4 months ago.
Mm,
But that's what I remember feeling from it.
sure.
So,
Okay. Well, how about
so let's go to songs.
yeah? And I see that you are correct that I have seen No Time to Die, but I had not filled in the box for it.
So we have Be Alive from King Richard, Dos Oruguitas from Encanto, which every child in America is going to be very disappointed that this was the song nominated.
Yeah, like
Um,
I was really surprised just because it's like I would have chosen almost any other song from the movie over that one. I mean, I don't think it's just because that's the one that's in Spanish, but I certainly, if you had asked me, "Oh, what song?" I would say, "Oh, well, Surface Pressure," or we don't talk about Bruno's. Like I was a little surprised that that was the one that became the big hit everywhere, but it's a good song. But I was just a little surprised just because that song didn't. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the one that impressed me the most.
yeah, I mean they're all good, but
Hmm.
I mean, come on. You talk to any 8-year-old in America and ask them about Bruno, and they'll say, "We don't talk about Bruno, no, no."
Yeah.
Like I get it. That's not what this is about, but come
Hmm.
on.
Well, I
it's a
think
good it's a good
well,
enough song, and it's the most popular song. It's on the damn radio.
yeah. Well, I think in Disney's defense, like they need my defense. Um, I suspect that they made the decision of which song they were going to submit before We Don't Talk About Bruno became a inexplicable, bizarre mega hit. I mean, it's a good song, but it's a little crazy how big a hit it was.
It is. Um, but I mean, even my
How
dog
about
loves it.
not
I'll send you
crazy,
that
not
video.
crazy, just surprising.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Down to Joy from Belfast.
Hmm.
No Time to Die from No Time to Die, and Somehow You Do from Four Good Days, which I'm not familiar with. And obviously,
Yeah,
No
I'm
Time
not
to
either.
Die is, I mean, it's a Bond song. It's
Hmm.
it's it's similar to the last 5 to 10 years of Bond
Hmm.
songs in that it's kind of got that
Yeah.
in the moment, but still homage to the old Bonds, which is what
Yeah.
makes them good,
Well,
right?
one of the things that I had a thought about in relation to this one, we haven't really talked about No Time to Die yet because it's just this is the first time it's come up in the nominations, but we've both seen that one, and just regarding the song in particular, when we recently on watching 100 movies did our Mission Impossible James Bond compare and contrast, we watched 7 of the Bond movies over the whole span of all of them. And what struck me actually is that there is actually quite a bit of variation in terms of what those songs are like over the years in James Bond movies, with in particular that Nobody Does It Better seeming to me like it belongs in a coffee commercial rather than a James Bond movie. But in any case, one of the things that struck me thinking about this one is just how consistent the Daniel Craig Bond movies have been in terms of really leaning into the Bond song style.
Yeah.
Like it is very, very James Bond song.
Yes, you could play someone who's somewhat. I mean, even if they didn't know all the things, but was just some. I guess it's a hard experiment, but
Mm,
it. The idea is that you could play every single Bond song and you could categorize all of the ones that Daniel Craig was a part of just by the sound.
mm,
The other ones you would pick by era, right? You would say, oh well, that's very 80s, so that's
mm-hmm.
got to be one of the 80s ones. That's very 70s. That's going to be a 70s one. But these ones, like all of them, you wouldn't be able to, I'm not saying you would pick them to the movie, but you could, obviously they have the title on them, but
Yeah.
that's why I said it's a weird experiment. Um, Conceptually though, they like you said, they evoke a certain thing.
Yeah.
So it's good, but I mean, it's very serviceable. So
Well, we'll talk more about it because we've both seen No Time to Die. We'll talk more about it in detail. But because it's specifically on the subject of the songs, what I want to say is that one of my all-time favorite YouTube videos is the comedian Paul F. Tompkins singing Skyfall as part of his onstage variety show. It's it's really kind of just what I described. It's not higher concept than that, but it's lovely and I love it. So, anyway, people should look up Paul F. Tompkins' Skyfall and be delighted like I was. But not yet. Wait until we're done. So, moving on, we have Best Production Design. The nominations are Dune, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, The Tragedy of Macbeth, and West Side Story. And as we've already talked about Dune, Nightmare Alley, and The Power of the Dog, the Tragedy of Macbeth is the latest. I was about to say Coen Brothers, but I believe it's only one of them, isn't it, for this one?
I believe so.
Yeah, and and it's all in black and white. And
Yes.
I've heard from people who I care about that they really liked it. So I'm looking forward to watching that one, but I have not yet. And then for West Side Story, I mean, Spielberg is Spielberg. Like, there's he's set a bar for himself, so a certain level of, the floor for Spielberg is pretty high, right? But one of the things I've heard is that the like just the production design of his West Side Story is like one of the best things about it.
Nice.
So I will go ahead and do cinematography as well.
Same category. It's literally the
And
same.
yeah, and it is literally the same 5 movies. So there you go: Dune, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, Tragedy of Macbeth, and West Side Story.
All right. I will jump into costume design, and because again, we'll cover the cinematography of those movies when we get to them.
Yeah.
Costume design and makeup and hairstyling. So costume design, we have Cruella with its only nomination, I believe.
I believe
Uh,
that's correct. Yeah.
Cyrano, Dune, Nightmare Alley, and West Side Story.
Hmm.
Um, we've discussed obviously Dune, Nightmare Alley, and West Side Story
Hmm.
already. Cruella is the, I believe, the origin story
Yeah,
of
well, or
Cruella.
an origin story, at
An
least.
origin story.
Yeah.
It's a very stylistic. Abby, my wife, loves it.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, highly recommends it. It's
I
just an
have.
entertaining, like
Yeah.
just a different take on a character that we know of. You know,
I've been told, like, let it be dumb and bonkers, and it will entertain you.
I that's accurate. But what you get is you get to see. So here's where why it fits into this category in a real quick sense is that Cruella was obviously in the Dalmatians. She's this style icon, and that's like what her whole point
Yeah.
is making the coat out of the Dalmatians. Well, by telling an origin story, she doesn't yet have the Dalmatian coat,
Hmm.
so they can make her have all these other really cool styles.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun about it, right? Is that she's just it's like an Instagram movie, you know.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I just remember the trailer had that, the dress that like looked like one thing until she set it on fire and it like burned away and looked like something else.
Correct. Like the whole point of the movie is what cool shit can we put her in and put on film?
Yeah.
Like that's the point, which is fine. It doesn't put you on best picture, but it puts you in best costume design.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Cyrano, I don't know much about beyond the fact that it is an adaptation of Cyrano de Bergerac with Peter Dinklage as the lead, and I honestly don't need to know more than that for me to want to watch it. So,
Same.
yeah. So I guess we'll see what the costumes are like. I tend to have a bias towards costumes for movies that are like fantasy or sci-fi where we're having to create costumes that aren't just clothes that exist already. But that said, the costumes in Nightmare Alley are pretty good because you're making a film noir in the 2020s. Like leaning into the style you're looking for and the way you want to have colors work in the light and shadow and all of that. Um, it certainly does go beyond just the idea of, hey, what clothes did they wear in the 1920s or whenever this is. 40s probably is when I think the original movie was made, at least. But in any case, let's keep moving. Best makeup and hairstyling.
Yep. So we have Coming to the number two America, as in
Mm-hmm.
the sequel to Coming to America. Cruella again, Dune, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and The House of Gucci. So I've seen Coming to America.
Ah. You've also seen
The other,
Dune. That was another one you missed there.
oh, I missed that one. I'm gonna get
Yep.
another percentage.
Racking them up.
Yep.
So tell us about
Uh,
Coming to America.
so Coming to America is fun. I mean, if you liked the first one, I mean, it's a comedy. It's the reason it's in here is because they're they're telling a continuation of a story that was told in the 1980s, right? So they have characters that were already made up in the 80s, because there's a lot of scenes where like it is just Eddie Murphy or Arsenio Hall
Mm-hmm.
like playing a bunch of different characters. And now these characters have aged 40 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so or 30 years, whatever it is. So they're not only having to play themselves in the aged sense, they're having to then make up the characters that they played in makeup 30 years ago.
Hmm.
And it's not distracting. It is just as humorous as it was in the first one. Like you never didn't know it wasn't
Yeah,
Eddie
sure.
Murphy or Arsenio
Well, you
Hall in the
kind of
first
don't
one.
want to not know, right? You want to know it's them.
Right.
That's part of the whole fun.
That's part of the gag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for some of them to again, for some of them to look kind of the same, but like just a little bit older, like the whole thing. I mean, just the fact it wasn't distracting to the story they were trying to tell, which is what I think made it good, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't over the top. And so if you like it and you think that type of movie is funny, it's a funny movie. Um, Again, not elevating it to best picture by any
Sure.
means, but it was fun
Hey,
enough to watch.
nothing
And
wrong with that at
this
all.
part of, yeah, this part of it was critical to kind of making it seamless,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Nice. And then, all right. So we're ready to move on. One last thing is House of Gucci is just one of those movies that I think a lot of people were expecting to get more nominations than it did.
Yeah, I had thought it would. I haven't seen it, but I
Mm-hmm.
had just
There's a lot of buzz about it.
there was. So I'm interested in seeing it and seeing maybe why it didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Well, next up we have Best Documentary Feature. The nominees are Ascension, Attica, Flee, Summer of Soul, and Riding with Fire. Now, what I'm fascinated by is that Flee is one we've seen twice already as both the best foreign film, sure, but also best animated. So we have an animated documentary. I don't know what that means, and I'm interested to find out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Now,
I'm also very interested. This is rarely for me a category where I've seen nothing.
mm,
I These are movies like I tend to like documentaries, so I
mm-hmm.
tend to have at least seen a couple of the ones on here. But not only have I not seen them, I don't actually recognize what any of them are.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not really familiar with any of them either.
Which that's just, yeah, that's odd.
But
So
we should make an effort. I think every year we kind of say that people should make an effort, even if they don't usually watch documentaries, and then we don't necessarily always end up seeing very many of them. I think sometimes though that tends to be, even when other categories have films that we haven't seen, often it's a little easier to find those. Sometimes the best foreign film and best documentary feature films are ones that are a little harder to track down and watch. But that's got to be less and less true as time goes on,
yeah,
right? Just the technology and streaming available now. Back when we first started doing these, it was just a question of like, well, is it still in the theater or is it on DVD yet? Those were the choices.
yep,
Um,
only two choices. Yeah.
all right, and so next we also have Best Sound, and so this is the second year running that they just decided to combine Best Sound Editing and Best Sound Mixing, which I'm sure made 7 people very angry when they made that change, but is probably for the best just because they were forever having to try to explain what the difference is to people who can't remember it 30 seconds after they hear it, and I include myself in that that categorization. They just sound similar enough that even if you kind of remember that one is one thing and one is the other thing, it's like, but wait, or is it the other way? Yeah. Anyway, Best Sound. The nominations are Belfast, Dune, No Time to Die, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. So, as previously discussed, we've both seen Dune, we've both seen No Time to Die. I've seen The Power of the Dog. All right. So, just 2 categories left. Do you want to take them?
Yep, I'll close it up. So best visual effects, Dune, Free Guy, which I'm actually surprised that neither of us have seen.
Hmm.
No Time to Die, both seen. It's off my spreadsheet. What is it?
Yeah, it's Shangxi, The Legend of the Ten Rings, which
Shang-Chi
is
and the
one of
Legend of the
the
Ten Rings.
Marvel Cinematic Universe movies.
Yep. And Spider-Man No Way Home,
Mm-hmm.
which you've seen
All,
both of those. So
yeah, so I've seen all of these except Free Guy, which I was kind of interested in seeing, but didn't kind of ever make it to. Um, I think Dune is obviously very pretty. Um, no Time to Die, like Well, so I actually want to take a step back and talk a little bit more. We're going to talk more about Dune, but certainly for me, the thing I came away from the movie with most is stuff related to like production design and visual effects. Partly just because I knew the story already and didn't find the new telling especially exciting. But what I did like is like, ooh, look how cool that spaceship looks.
Yep.
Um, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, I love those movies. I think they're both good. Especially as a longtime Spider-Man fan. If put to it, I bet you I could find 10 Spider-Man toys and put them on camera inside of 30 seconds. But I'm not going to do that because that's indulgent. But I really loved Spider-Man No Way Home. In ways that perhaps we will talk more about at some point. And then Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is almost the opposite in the sense that I really have no background on that comic book character, but enjoyed the movie a lot. But I almost, with the special effects in it, I'm almost like a little bit, just because I think the weakest section of the movie is the one is the bit that's the most special effects driven. But it's still a very good movie overall. I like it a lot. It's just that part was not my favorite part. What do you suppose we're even talking about with No Time to Die? Like, why is that nominated here, you think?
I think it was probably just from the action movie perspective, it was just one of the most well done ones of the year.
Yeah, I guess
And
so.
but to your point, it didn't blow me away as like, wow, that ought to be on there, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
But it was, I mean,
it certainly wasn't bad in that regard. I mean, but there was nothing that, like, just even in the context of thinking about it right now, I'm just trying to think, like, well, okay, what was the big special effect that we're even talking about?
I mean, probably this would be a spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, the climax, perhaps.
Yeah, the climax was
Yeah,
probably it, but that almost goes in as well as in film editing as it does visual effects.
yeah.
Like the way
Which,
that they cut that for something that was so iconic
well, the other thing is too
in the
that
canon. Yeah.
we're just, this has been a weird couple of years, and so maybe it's just kind of a question of like, um, there weren't as many big special effects blockbusters out there for it to compete with this year.
Yeah.
Mm.
I still gotta feel I still gotta feel like it's part of the impact of the end.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's why, like I
Well,
said, I almost feel like it would have been better in editing.
we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
We'll discuss that one more in detail for sure. Um, but yeah, so how about
So we'll
the
go to
that
editing.
last category?
Yep. Don't Look Up, Dune, King Richard, The Power of the Dog, and Tick Tick Boom.
Yeah. So
So again, seeing Don't Look Up here almost reinforces my memory of like the way the story is told,
hmm
in that like how it segments off all these different stories and then intertwines them like very TV style. I feel like that's why it's in here. I don't think there was anything dramatic about its editing. I think it was just they interspersed a lot of stories well. So
yeah. Okay. Like the one movie that's kind of notable in this category because it wasn't one of the Best Picture nominations is Tick Tick Boom, but as previously mentioned, the nature of the story being told, the editing actually really does feature very prominently in it because what we have is something that was originally written as like I said, a one man show where occasionally, like, there's a live band behind the one guy, and he occasionally has someone come on stage to sing like one song with him. And like, that's the original thing. And then the movie is cutting between sort of a presentation of the show in that regard and the actual dramatization of the events being told in the story. Um, And yeah, the editing is flashy in it. You know, just like with score, we sometimes talk about editing that is seamless versus editing that calls attention to itself. And Tick Tick Boom is certainly the latter. The editing is notable and, you know, relevant to the story being told, which is compelling. So I really like it in that regard. Um, yeah. All right. So here's the question: we have now covered all of our categories for Oscar nominations. Perhaps for this episode, we'll save the in-depth discussions for the next time. But let's just talk high level. Like, what are the movies that you're most excited to seek out next to watch? What are the ones that you think is weird? Any other general thoughts? Because we've got
Um,
our list
look,
here of
so
lots to
there's
see.
one that kind of hits on both categories,
Mm-hmm.
and that's Flea.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to watch it, but it is kind of weird for what you already described.
Intriguing.
Um,
Like, what's going on there?
Intriguing.
Mm.
Yeah, like I want to see what that's about. Um, King Richard, I think, is a fairly accessible movie that I'll watch it because it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I know this story, the broad strokes of the story, so I'd like to see it done well. Um, I'm very interested in Tick Tick Boom.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I will probably enjoy the Tragedy of Macbeth. I mean, I know the story, and it seems like kind of a cool adaptation. And and I'll just leave it with I really want to see some of these documentaries. It
Mm-hmm.
actually is very. I know you talked about how we don't always see a lot of the documentaries, but like usually I've seen some of them, and I don't necessarily the ones I haven't seen I don't necessarily go see. But the fact that I've seen none and know of none
Mm-hmm.
is odd, and so I'm curious to go seek these out. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, certainly, I think I'm gonna make watching Don't Look Up a priority, partly just because then we can talk about it, but also just to go ahead and form my own opinion. I think my avoidance of it has kind of been because I've heard a few too many people giving their own take on it already.
Yes.
Um, and so to the point where sort of I kind of feel like I get it without having watched it, but because I haven't watched it, do I really get it or do I just get someone else's take on it?
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that just the timing of when it came out, I was like looking for something, some time to kill, and just it was on, and so it was before any opinion had come out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I saw it fresh. So it'll be interesting to see if we formulated similar or different opinions.
Yeah, I think my anxiety about it is just that I feel like I'm sort of already on the side of, you know, climate change is a big deal and we shouldn't ignore it. And so the idea of like, let's do satire about the humankind's inability to respond to problems like that, like, I'm not sure how much I feel like I want to laugh about that.
So that may be the most interesting part of our discussion is that we may land on the same feeling at the end of the movie, even though I saw it before a single review it
Hmm.
came out or that I had read, and you will have seen it after a ton of kind
Well,
of
in
yeah. But anyway,
one of the things that just as a broader topic, I was recently fascinated to learn of the way. So I belong to a couple of discords that occasionally Discord servers that talk about movies, and there's a person in one of them whom I will not name who has many takes on a variety of things that I find just mystifying. It's not even just a question of like our politics are different or something. It's just like I don't even know how you got there from the facts at hand. But the way they watch movies is so foreign to the way that I do, which is to say, if at all possible, they will never watch a trailer or a commercial about a movie. And what they do, and they never read any reviews. What they do is pirate every movie that comes out and watch every single one of them for at least 10 minutes. And if they're not loving it after 10 minutes, they turn it off and watch the next one.
That leads to a very specific type of movie that you would watch.
Well, to be sure, like they have described different varieties of movies that they did in fact enjoy, but it certainly feels to me like you waste a lot of time on movies that you would probably know up front that you won't like if you had paid any attention to what they were. And also, there are going to be plenty of movies that maybe just don't start strong, but you would love it if you kept watching it, but you turn it off after 10 minutes.
That's
And
where I
because,
was leading to. You're
yeah,
defaulting to movies that grab your attention in 10 minutes, which isn't necessarily.
yeah. And one of the things that, for example, having certain reviewers whose opinions you respect and who you understand the way they think and talk about movies is a good way to find out if, for example, someone says, I wasn't so sure about the beginning, but boy, then it really kicked in. That's how you learn that stuff. That's how you use discernment and filter the many films available into the ones that you are more likely to like. And yeah, so I got thinking on that just because in the context of Don't Look Up, the hesitation I was feeling was partially driven by the fact that there are some film writers whom I really respect and like their opinions who felt that way about it. And I said, based on their description of it, I feel like that's how I will feel too. But again, I haven't seen it to say. And so, needless probably to be said, this person is pretty hardcore on the subject of spoilers, which is to what I find to be a ridiculous extent. I mean, it's one thing to have a discussion about like how soon is too soon to start talking about plot spoilers for a movie, and they drew the line in the sand that there is never an expiration. You should always warn that you might talk about spoilers about any movie forever. And at a certain point, so in any case, this is really a tangent except for just my fascination and morbid curiosity of the way this person experiences the world. Anyway,
Yeah.
I just feel like you don't have to do things that way. Let people help you.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, it's a lot of
Because
life out there.
the only
This isn't
reason
a,
they stop everything after 10 minutes is because they have downloaded 400 movies a month. To try to get through, and of course you can't watch all of them. So you have to just be really, just cut it down. I just imagine someone going to the bookstore wearing a blindfold, going to the first shelf and lifting the blindfold only to just read the first 3 pages of every book and then put it back if it's not what they want. But they just go through systematically every book on every shelf.
yeah. Yeah. See, I had somebody say to me once that I'll just be brief with this that, anything that you want to try or experience, give it 1 hour and see what it feels like. And this is not just movies, this is books, I mean golf, exercise, like whatever it is. Like just if you're curious about something, commit to doing an hour. But the precursor to that is exactly what you're talking about. Is you're not just trying everything in the world for an hour. Like
Yeah.
you're thinking about things that, hey, would that be something I would want to commit to spending time with? And then after an hour, if you say this sucks, like I don't want to do this, then leave it.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, for
because if you read
example,
an hour of a book, you watch an hour of a movie, you play an hour of golf, you play an hour of tennis. Like if you just went and did that, and you would know, like, yeah, you wouldn't be great at tennis after an hour, but whether it was something you wanted to spend your time on.
yeah. Like,
Right?
I know that personally I don't like the taste of black olives. And so as a result, if I see something that has a lot of black olives on it, I know that I won't like it without having to take a big bite of it first.
Right. Like why, like you said, like why experience the world that way? Like life's too short. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it really all comes from the near psychosis that they've built into the idea of being spoiled on anything. You know, the idea of like, oh, what? The new Star Wars movie has droids in it? Thanks a lot. You've ruined it for me.
well, and there's a bizarre level of FOMO in there of
Yeah.
just wanting to be able to say like, oh, have you seen the new blah 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 movie? I
Mm-hmm.
watched 10 minutes of it, it sucked.
Yeah.
As opposed to, no, I haven't seen that. You know, like it's okay to not have seen it. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Um,
haven't seen it. Tell me about it. Should I
So in
watch
any
it?
case, yeah, I think that we're on the same page as far as, you know, our lesson to everybody is like, it is great to try movies that you haven't heard much about. Sometimes it can be fun to see a movie that you go in knowing nothing about. It's kind of rude to spoil a recent movie for someone who doesn't want to be spoiled on it. But that said, you are allowed to use some discernment to help you decide which movies you're more likely to enjoy and which ones you aren't.
Right. For example, I told you the other day I was really liking the Kanye documentary. I don't think you're probably going to watch the Kanye documentary. I wasn't
Did
doing it
you
to
guess
sell
that
you
by
on
virtue of
watching.
my not replying to your message about it?
I was just telling you, like, hey,
No, no.
if for some
Yeah.
reason, because again, I assumed you didn't,
Mm.
but if for some reason you had some weird inclination of like, I want to see a documentary on this guy, but I'm not sure if this is any good,
Well,
I told you it was good. But
I
I'm not offended
appreciate
if
the
you don't
data
watch it.
point, right? You know, like if something else comes up to make me think about it, I will remember. Hey, Mike said it was really good. Maybe I should check it out. You know.
And he wore a Blade Runner t-shirt, which I thought was interesting. Like, but it's very good for people who want to watch Kanye documentaries.
Yeah. There you go.
If you don't give a shit about what Kanye did in 1998, then it's not a good movie for you.
All right. Well, so we
Anyway,
got off
yeah,
on all of that because I was talking about watching Don't Look Up. The other, I definitely want to try to see the other Best Picture nominations just in general, of course. But yeah, I'm also interested in Flea and figuring out what the deal is there. And the Tragedy of Macbeth as well, just because that one was already kind of on my list for sure. Anyway, and like I said, I've heard a lot of people tell me that they thought that The Worst Person in the World was very good. So again, that was one of the best foreign film movies. And so there's lots to see and lots to talk about. So we will return for episodes over the next few weeks. We actually have more time than usual this year because the Oscar ceremony is not until March 27th. So we have a little while to try to see more of these films. And when we have, we will come back and talk about them.
excellent.
All right. So with that, thank you everybody for listening and or watching. If you like the Twitch live stream, twitch.tv/Christiana Ellis is when we do these, and I usually post on Twitter at Christiana Ellis about when they're going to happen. The VODs obviously go to YouTube and post to ChristianaEllis.com. And last, of course, we also do the audio podcast version. If you like any of these, please tell us. We like feedback. And we will be back for more episodes. So in the meantime, go watch some good movies, whether or not they are nominated for Oscars.
That's all I got.